The digging woman. The night was cold and still, the kind of eerie silence that made every small sound feel 10 times louder. Deep in the wilderness of Maine, where the trees swallowed the light of the moon and the wind whispered through the endless expanse of forest, a young couple, just teenagers, were spending their first night camping together. The boy and the girl had been dating for a little while, both of them adventurous, both eager to escape the world for a weekend. They had hiked for miles before setting up their small tent in a clearing surrounded by towering trees. Their only company, the quiet rustle of the wind through the branches. At 1 a.m., the girl woke up suddenly. A dull pressure sat in her lower stomach. She needed to go to the bathroom. With a soft sigh, she carefully shifted in her sleeping bag, reaching toward the zipper of the tent. Then she froze. Something wasn't right. At first, she wasn't sure what had stopped her. But as she lay still, her breath barely audible, she realized it wasn't just an eerie feeling. There was a sound. A soft, repetitive scratching coming from just outside the tent. She strained her ears, her heartbeat quickening. It wasn't an animal. She had grown up around the woods and knew the difference. This wasn't the quiet snuffling of a raccoon or the hurried scratching of a fox. It was something deliberate, something human. The noise came again, a steady rhythmic digging. Her skin crawled. She turned her head slightly, glancing toward her boyfriend, still asleep beside her. The rational part of her brain tried to dismiss the sound. Maybe it was just a small animal after all, but something in her gut screamed otherwise. Swallowing hard, she reached for the zipper of the tent, moving painfully slow, careful not to make any noise. As she pulled it down just a few inches, a thin sliver of moonlight spilled through the opening, illuminating a small section of the forest outside. And that's when she saw her. Just 2 or 3 feet away from their tent, a woman was crouching in the dirt. Her back was turned, her thin, bony hands feverishly clawing at the earth. The girl's breath hitched. The woman's fingernails were caked in dirt, her movements frantic, almost unnatural, as she dug deeper and deeper into the ground. What the hell is she doing? The girl felt like her body had turned to ice. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, only watch as this mystery woman, who had no business being out in the middle of nowhere at this hour, continued to dig with an unnatural intensity. Her body snapped backward in terror, landing on her boyfriend. He stirred instantly, jolted awake by her sudden movement. "What? What is it?" He whispered groggily, but her wide, terrified eyes told him something was wrong. She barely managed to lift a trembling finger, pointing at the small opening in the tent. "Look," she whispered. Confused, the boy leaned forward, squinting into the darkness. He adjusted the opening just slightly, and that's when he saw her too. His stomach clenched. A woman. Crouched, digging like she was possessed. Her movements erratic but purposeful. "What the?" he muttered, his voice barely a breath. Instinctively, he reached for his flashlight. The girl grabbed his arm. "No," she hissed. "Don't." But he had already clicked it on. The beam of artificial light cut through the darkness, illuminating the woman in full. And she stopped. Like a machine suddenly switched off, her hands fell still in the dirt. Then, in one slow, unnatural movement, she rose to her feet. She stood deathly still for a moment. Then, with terrifying slowness, she began to turn her head toward them. The light hit her face, revealing wide, vacant eyes. Her expression was devoid of emotion. Not startled, not afraid, not even angry. Just blank. The girl and the boy did not move. For what felt like an eternity, they simply stared at each other. A silent, tension-filled standoff between the terrified teenagers and this uninvited intruder in the woods. Then, without a word, the woman simply turned around and walked away. Not quickly, not in a panic. Just walked away, disappearing into the trees as if nothing had happened. The couple sat there in stunned silence, barely able to process what they had just seen. Finally, after what felt like hours, the boy swallowed. "Should we?" "No." The girl cut him off immediately. There was no way in hell they were going out there after her. Instead, they waited. They sat in their tent, gripping each other's hands so tightly that their fingers ached, listening for any sign that she had returned. For a long time, there was nothing but the quiet rustling of the trees. Eventually, they convinced themselves that it was over. That maybe she was just some strange, lost hiker who had wandered too close to their camp. That maybe it was nothing to worry about. They were wrong, because not an hour later, they heard it again. Footsteps, running, fast, charging straight toward their tent. The girl screamed as the boy unzipped the tent, flashlight in hand, ready to confront whatever this was. But by the time they burst outside, The woman was already there, not digging anymore. This time, she was rummaging through their belongings, her movements jerky, almost animalistic. She would pick up an item, examine it, then toss it carelessly over her shoulder, repeating the same bizarre, mindless process over and over again. The boy shouted, "You need to leave." The woman didn't react. She kept tossing their things, moving with an almost robotic detachment. Only when he took a step forward, raising his flashlight, did she finally pause. Slowly, she turned her head toward him, her expression blank, eyes locked onto his. A beat of silence. Then, with that same unnerving slowness, she turned and walked away again, disappearing into the darkness. But this time, they knew she wasn't really gone. For the next 2 hours, they stayed outside their tent, gripping their flashlights, waiting for her to come back again. She did, over and over. Each time, she would return to the spot where she had been digging, clawing at the dirt like a woman possessed. They screamed at her, threw rocks near her feet, but nothing worked. Finally, after hours of this horrific cycle, the couple made the decision. At first light, they were getting the hell out of there. When dawn finally broke, they stepped out of their tent to a horrifying sight. Their belongings had been scattered across the clearing, thrown into the trees, some items torn apart. But the most unsettling thing, the hole in the ground, the one she had been digging, it was now a foot deep. She had been watching them, waiting for them to go to sleep. They never found out what she was digging for, and they never went camping again. The Trail of Shadows, a hiker's nightmare. In 2008, an 18-year-old named Matt Higgins set off on an adventure he had dreamed of for years. Inspired by the movie Into the Wild, he yearned for the raw, untamed wilderness. A place where he could test himself against nature and, perhaps, find something deeper within. His plan was ambitious. He would hike the entire California section of the Pacific Crest Trail, a grueling 1,700-mile trek stretching from the scorching deserts near the Mexican border to the misty, forested mountains near Oregon. It was a journey that would test his endurance, patience, and ultimately, his sanity. Matt was no stranger to the outdoors. He had spent his childhood hiking through the wilds of Oregon, camping in both marked and unmarked territories, navigating through dense woods where predators lurked unseen. But nothing, not even his years of experience, could have prepared him for what awaited him deep in the Lassen National Forest. A silent encounter. The first weeks of his hike were uneventful, even serene. He moved at his own pace, camping wherever he found a clearing, surviving on carefully rationed food. The occasional rattlesnake or unexpected dehydration spell was nothing new. But as he entered the remote, suffocating depths of Lassen National Forest, the air itself seemed to change. The trees pressed in closer, their gnarled limbs intertwining overhead, casting deep, shifting shadows even in broad daylight. The silence became oppressive. One afternoon, as he rounded a bend in the trail, he saw them. A man and a woman sat on a boulder just off the path. They were dressed entirely in white. Loose, flowing clothes that seemed out of place in the rugged wilderness. Their faces were gaunt, their skin pale and smeared with dirt. The man had a thick, wild beard. The woman's hair was long and tangled. But what sent a chill creeping up Matt's spine was their eyes. They weren't merely watching him. They were staring at him, unblinking, their expressions unreadable. The longer he looked, the more unnatural they seemed. Their clothes were ragged, yet they sat in eerie stillness, their posture unnaturally stiff. Something about them felt wrong, as though they had been waiting for him. Matt hesitated, forcing himself to glance away. He muttered a quick, "Hello," as he passed them, but they didn't respond. Not a wave, not a nod, not even a flicker of recognition that he had spoken. Just those vacant, dead-eyed stares following him as he walked by. Unease prickled the back of his neck, but he shook it off. Maybe they were drifters. Maybe they didn't speak English. He had no reason to worry. Or so he thought. The first violation. That night, Matt set up camp well off the trail, pushing deep into the trees for privacy. He followed his usual precautions, hanging his food high in a tree to deter bears. The air was thick and still, the kind of night where sound seemed to carry forever. But exhaustion overtook his unease, and soon he drifted into sleep. Sometime in the early hours, he stirred. Something had woken him, a noise just beyond his tent. He lay still, his heartbeat suddenly thundering in his ears. Then he heard it again. A faint crunch of leaves. A footstep. Holding his breath, he strained to listen. There were no windows in his tent, only the suffocating darkness and the terrifying certainty that someone, or something, was moving outside. Another step, then another. Slow, deliberate, approaching. Frozen in place, he clutched the handle of his knife. But just as quickly as the sounds had begun, they stopped. Silence swallowed the forest once more. Dawn came like a lifeline. Matt unzipped his tent, half expecting to find nothing but his own paranoia waiting for him outside. Instead, his blood ran cold. His food bag was gone. At first, he thought it was a bear. But when he scanned the dirt beneath the tree, there were no claw marks, no paw prints. Instead, he saw the unmistakable imprint of boots. 2 sets. They led from the tree to his tent, circling it, lingering. The people in white had followed him, and they had stood mere feet away as he slept. The whispering nightmares. The next few days, Matt hiked harder than ever, pushing himself beyond exhaustion. He was certain they were gone. They had stolen what they wanted, his food. There was no reason for them to follow him anymore. But on the 4th night, that fragile hope shattered. He had camped again off trail, setting up a perimeter of sticks around his tent as an early warning system. This time, he fell asleep with his knife in hand. Then, deep in the night, the first crack of breaking wood jolted him awake. His pulse hammered. It's just an animal, he told himself. It has to be. But then he heard it, the whispering. It came from all around him. A frantic, hushed murmuring carried by the wind. Low voices, unintelligible, yet undeniably human. Then, footsteps. Slow, circling. Just like before. Only this time, they didn't stop. Matt barely breathed. He clutched his knife, waiting for whatever was out there to make its move. Then, suddenly, his tent lit up. A flashlight. Someone was watching him. The light clicked off. Silence. And then, a rush of footsteps. Matt exploded from his tent, knife raised, screaming in raw terror. He heard movement behind him, rapid footsteps crashing through the undergrowth. They were chasing him. He ran blindly, smashing through branches, slipping on moss-covered rocks. He could feel them behind him, their presence and almost physical force pushing him forward. Then he saw it. A fallen tree. In sheer desperation, he dove beneath it, wedging himself into the narrow space underneath. For what felt like eternity, he lay there, the damp earth pressing against his face, listening. Then, in the distance, the beam of a flashlight cut through the dark, sweeping back and forth. They were searching for him. For hours, he didn't move. He barely breathed. Only when the first weak light of dawn trickled through the canopy did he dare to crawl out. He didn't even go back for his gear. He ran, heart pounding, all the way to civilization. When he reached the nearest town, he reported everything to the police. But there were no answers, no suspects. Just whispers of other hikers who had vanished, their stories fading into the eerie, unsolved legends of the Pacific Crest Trail. Matt never finished his hike. And to this day, he still wonders, who were the people in white? And what would have happened if he hadn't woken up in time? He never went back to find out.